Welcome to Beyond the Matrix with Rod Bryant and Jerry Gordon here on Israel News Talk Radio. Unplug, strap yourself in because you are about to move beyond the Matrix.
It has been a while since we have had Diliman Abdulkader on the show, and he is a very good partner of ours and loves to come on Beyond the Matrix to talk about the Kurdish people. He's got a very important role. It's been a while since we've given you actually an update about the Kurds and what their latest situation is. Pretty much it's been in the media pretty quiet, not a lot of people talking about it. Jerry, could you introduce Diliman for us?
Yes. Diliman is the co-founder and official spokesperson for something called the American Friends of Kurdistan. It's American Friends of Kurdistan. And when we were frequently having him on the program over the last couple of years, he was with another policy shop in D.C., where he cut his teeth on doing this. He and a partner essentially have founded this as an advocacy and educational mechanism to communicate what the requirements are for Kurds to become unified, for one thing, and also to deal with the current issues and policy questions that are facing any administration, whether it's the existing Trump one or anything that follows, and those that preceded. So he's really knowledgeable, and he has a big plus. He speaks in perfect American idiomatic English.
Yeah. And we're also going to come to realize that this whole Kurdish situation is a very complex situation. It's been like that for hundreds of years. Okay, so this is not like it's a new problem that we have just now. It's been a problem for many administrations because of the complexity. And even the different tribes of the Kurds that are there, they disagree with how they think should work. So we're going to have a good conversation. We're going to learn a lot during this show and also give you an opportunity to be active, to be able to help show your support for the Kurdish people. Don't go away. We'll be right back after these messages.
Yeah, it's nice. We'll put it up on our social media and everything. So
excellent. Okay, in 3, 2, and 1.
Welcome back to Beyond the Matrix, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
I am back. Thank you so much for sticking around from the introduction of the show. I'm Rod Bryant, along with my co-host and producer, Jerry the G-Man Gordon. And we have a very familiar face for those who are watching on YouTube. I want to let you know, thank you for watching on YouTube. And his name is Diliman Abdulkader. I sometimes just twist that up. I'm sorry. And as Jerry introduced in the beginning of the show, he has worked extensively for and passionately to lobby Congress, etc., for favorable judgment toward the Kurdish people. And what we want to do, Diliman, is to bring you in and get the latest update. First of all, you are no longer with Emet. That's what you were with back when we spoke to you last. What are you doing now? And tell us, how does that still affect your work with the Kurdish people?
Thank you to both of you, first of all, for having me back on. Great to speaking with you guys again. As you said, I'm no longer with the previous policy shop where I directed the Kurdistan project there. Now I am the co-founder of American Friends of Kurdistan, which is an advocacy and education organization based here in Washington, D.C. And we launched AFK in November 2019, mid-November 2019, in response to President Trump's withdrawal from Syria. And our objective and main mission is to strengthen American-Kurdish relations, preserving American national security interests in the Middle East, while advocating and educating on behalf of the Kurdish people on Congress.
Jerry, go ahead.
Diliman, you wrote a pretty thought-provoking article that appeared in the Washington Examiner about shifting what was the failed U.S. policies in Iraq towards Kurdistan. What are the takeaways from that article for the benefit of our listeners?
Right. So it's regarding Iraq. I believe I wrote that for the Washington Examiner.
Right.
In regards to Iraqi Kurdistan and our position in Iraq, the United States, the United States unfortunately has a status quo policy in regards to the state of Iraq. We have had that since 2003. Under the current administration and the previous two. The United States has spent from 2003 to 2020, nearly 17 years, has spent over $2 trillion in Iraq alone. Over nearly 4,500 American lives have been sacrificed and lost American service members in Iraq alone. Trillions of dollars, military equipment have been lost. And what has been the return for Americans? What are the returns for American taxpayers? Not much. Iraq is still a failed and weak state, in my view. We've gone through countless elections in Iraq, none of which have been stable and prosperous. None of which has tackled Iraq's main issues, such as the economy, such as the security apparatus of the state. My argument in this piece was, hey, let's step away from Baghdad, whether we like it or not. Yes, we want to have an influence in Baghdad to push back Iran, but whether we like it or not, at the end of the day, Iran is Iraq's neighbor. 60% of the Iraqi population is Shia, while Iran is Shia. They do have cultural, economic ties that we just can't push these two states away from each other. The alternative to this is having U.S. investments based in the northern part of the country in the autonomous Kurdistan region. And with that, largely because, as you know very well, that the Kurds are very pro-American, pro-Western. And I've also argued in the piece that, hey, Americans are starting to realize that gradually, especially our military. That's why we have increased our military presence there in Erbil, the capital, in Sulaymaniyah Province, and in Halabja as well. So I think that's where we can see the best results for our national security, for American taxpayers as well. And in return, we also back a loyal ally, the Kurds.
Your national interest article talked about renewing U.S. relations with the Syrian Kurds. And currently, the administration has so-called unity talks with Kurdish groups in Syria. So the question is, what are your points and how successful and what is behind these administration unity talks?
Right. So since the withdrawal, the Kurds back in October 2019, the Kurds have been felt a sense of betrayal from the United States. However, the United States has taken steps to sow these ties, re-sow these ties in order to establish this partnership long term. The United States gradually again realizes that, hey, the Kurds are our true partners, that even though we don't want to have thousands of American troops on the ground, currently we only have 600, that if we want to see a stable Syria, we have to bring Kurds to the international table in Geneva. In order to do that, now the Kurds have been attempting to be recognized internationally because they have been given pushback from Turkey, which is an adversary of the Kurds, unfortunately. But in order to do that, the United States wants all the Kurdish factions and components within northeast Syria to be on one side. And therefore, that's why it is mediating these talks between the different factions, which is basically the leading PYD political party, which is which controls the YPJ fighters that we know of, and the other main opposition is the KDP, the Kurdistan, the Barzani-led factions, the EN basically, and those. There's some distrust between those two groups, largely because the Barzani-led parties have been known to have ties with Erdogan, with Turkey, where Erdogan attacks the other side. So, but this, I mean, from a Kurdish perspective, of course, this is welcomed. This is a great opportunity for Kurds to defy Erdogan's attempt at dividing the region, and also Erdogan's goal in making sure these talks fail is to prevent an autonomous northeast Kurdish-led region, I should say, similar to the autonomous Kurdistan region of Iraq. That's his main goal. But the United States, and we welcome this step, is looking beyond Turkey's ambition and goals, and is pushing the Kurds to communicate and stand together.
If you were to put this thing on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as the relationship that the United States has with the Kurdish people after the pullout from Syria, and the echoes of, look, we've damaged our relationship with the Kurdish people, with Kurdish leadership, where do you think it is compared to where you've got your ears on the pulse of what's going on? What do you think is going on between America and the Kurdish region?
It's it's very difficult to say, because in every part of the region is different, and every administration is different. And I'm sure we'll get to it later, as we've seen most recent news, what this administration feels about the Kurdish people. The Kurds, all the Kurds can do is attempt to communicate with all sides, be bipartisan, because at the end of the day, the Kurds are non-state actors. We rely on Baghdad to, even though there's an autonomous region in the north, however, doesn't have the tools and capabilities that a state needs. So we rely on capitals like Baghdad. We rely on Turkey to be the voice for the minorities, for example, the Kurds in Turkey. But this is not the case. That's why we need America's support and American backing in the region. As of now, in Syria, I would say it's gradually healing. But at the end of the day, there is still territory loss due to the withdrawal. The Kurds still demand that the United States play a bigger role in pushing back its NATO ally. In Iraq, the Kurds, there's a great partnership between the coalition to defeat ISIS and the Peshmerga forces. But the ordinary Kurds would like the United States to play a greater role internally in regards to institution building and accountability and transparency.
So they're not necessarily wanting more troops on the ground as much as more assistance in infrastructure. Is that what you're saying?
And that's the argument I made in one of my pieces, is that, hey, troops on the ground is always not the answer. And also, this is an endless war argument, if you would, putting countless troops for so many years. But as you can see, the 600 troops in northeast Syria still does the job as the 2,000 troops that did before. The key is to not fully withdraw. And that was my same argument beforehand. In Iraqi Kurdistan, yes, we want American troop presence and whatnot, just because it's in U.S. interest to be there. But also ordinary Kurds on the ground want the United States to not just focus on military partnership, but institution building, tackling the corruption between the parties that lead this government.
Very well stated, and I needed some clarification, because instantly most people think, they want more military, more endless wars. Very good statement. You're listening to Beyond the Matrix here on Israel News Talk Radio. I'm Rod Bryant, along with Jerry Gordon and Diliman, and we are thanking you for watching us on YouTube at Nativ, N-E-T-I-V, online, one word, Nativ Online. And you can watch us live during the show and also on Beyond the Matrix. We'll be right back after these messages. Sorry, I've got a house full of kids that just walked in. Stand by. Sorry.
I got to get something else done. Hold on. Okay. So, Diliman, after this break, you want to deal with some hot stuff about what's going on over there and duplicity, and then we'll get to Mr. Bolton after that. So, looking at these questions, why is Turkey able to bomb the place, et cetera?
Let's do it. Yeah, that's perfect.
Why are some conflicting Kurdish regional parties supplying intelligence to them?
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. So,
do we know who's providing that intelligence?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's pretty abominable.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Please don't tell me it's our guys.
It's the Barzani.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah. The same opposition faction in northeast Syria. The annex, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's,
and of course, in other parts, the other party, the PUK, the Talibani faction as well.
So let's deal with those questions, including his ethnic cleansing of Afrin. And he's bombing Yazidis and Christians.
In Sinjar, exactly.
In Sinjar.
Yep. And most recently, I think, 3 days ago, maybe?
Yeah, less than 3.
In Sulaymaniyah, just, airstrike, drone attacks.
Do we know the death toll of any of those situations?
And we know the death toll of the Sulaymaniyah one, which was 3 civilians.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
but the fact is that Turkey is bombing areas that we had effectively liberated after vanquishing ISIS.
Exactly.
And that sounds like it's an act on the part of the Muslim Brotherhood, quite frankly.
And the argument is, basically this is Muslim Brotherhood or ISIS's Air Force. Why wasn't Turkey involved in airstrikes, when the Yazidis were suffering in 2014 during the genocide? So.
Oh, yeah. All right, so I think that should be the focus of perhaps a second part.
Perfect.
So we'll start with questions 7, 8, and 9. And if we got time, gotta turn the page here. You can deal with the question about why the Iraqis are suddenly getting live about beating up on the PMU.
Oh, yeah, the new prime minister?
Yeah.
Question 10. Yeah.
I guess it goes back to your earlier comments about sucking up to the U.S. to support another failed state.
Exactly. This is just the continuous policies that we have.
Yep. Okay,
I'm just about ready. I'm finishing the setup. Okay, here we go in 3, 2, and 1.
Welcome back to Beyond the Matrix, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
If you have not heard, we have a live broadcast of the show Beyond the Matrix on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing during the show itself, or later on save it or share it with your friends. We really appreciate it. The NETIV online, and make sure you take time to subscribe right there if you wouldn't mind. I really appreciate it. We have Diliman Abdulkader We've been talking about the Kurdish, basically what's been going on in the last 2 years. And even though it may not have been in the newspaper a lot, there's been a lot of things going on, especially with Turkey. Why don't we, Gary, well, I'm going to pitch it over to you, and Jerry, you can go ahead and ask your line of questions.
Diliman, why is Erdogan bombing areas that the U.S. and the Kurds liberated in Iraq? And bombing Yazidis, Christians, and Kurds. What's going on there?
In Erdogan's argument, he is targeting not all Kurds. He is targeting the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party. However, this is obviously not true. The areas that Erdogan is bombing is filled with civilians. And you mentioned the Yazidis. This is the area in Sinjar, or Shingal as the Kurds call it, the whole refugee camps where 3,000 Yazidi women and girls are still missing. And they are becoming casualties of Erdogan's continuous bombardment and targeting of the Kurds, supposedly the PKK. And most recently, Turkey has conducted drone strikes against the Kurds deep into the autonomous Kurdistan region in the province of Sulaymaniyah, and actually in a resort town where 3 civilians were killed. And this is a again, the argument is the PKK. However, little girls and women and families in resort areas are not PKK militants. Turkey is trying to destabilize this autonomous region. Also, something to pay attention to is that Turkey is attempting to have part of the autonomous Kurdistan region where they defy the Kurdish government, where they defy Kurdish expansion into their region, to kneel and accept that Turkey, this is historical Ottoman Turkish territory. Right. But the Kurds say, no, this is our territory. Parts of the autonomous Kurdistan region have agreed, unfortunately, that work and partner with the Erdogan government. Parts kind of sort of work with the Erdogan government, but still try to separate themselves from this invasion.
Is there a reason why they're not willing to maybe try to negotiate with Erdogan? What do they have to lose? Is it one of these things where if we give them this little bit of territory and let him claim it, pretty soon he's going to try to claim everything? What is the situation? Exactly,
and you hit it right on the nail. I mean, the fear of the Kurds is, we know Turkish history. We know what Turkey is capable of. I mean, not just towards the Kurds. Look at Cyprus since 1974. Once Turkey enters a region, once Turkey occupies a region, its ultimate goal is to annex this region. But sadly, Turkey has already over 10 military bases in northern Iraq, in the autonomous Kurdistan region, in KDP-controlled areas. And Turkey wants to expand these areas. So today, Turkey controls nearly 60 villages with the permission of with its KDP partners. And that's one of the clans, with the ruling clan that governs the Kurdistan regional government. And Erdogan's attempt is to continue this expansion well into the autonomous region. But I think the boiling point will be Sulaymaniyah Province, where it's very known to has a patriotic history and a history of protesting and demonstrating and standing against these adversaries.
Jared, go ahead.
Diliman, you've got information that's kind of astounding about these groups in the Kurdistan regional government who are actually supplying intelligence to the Turks to conduct these activities. Why are they motivated to do that?
Well, if you look at the autonomous Kurdistan region, it is split mostly into by the Kurdistan Democratic Party, which is affiliated with the Barzani clan, and the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, which is affiliated with the Talabani family and Talabani clan. the KDP, and in the KDP areas far north near the Turkish border is where the PKK is within Iraq, within the autonomous region. So the KDP does not control all of PKK, all of its areas. PKK and KDP have tensions. In order for KDP's self-interest to push out the PKK, they have aligned with, militarily and economically aligned with the Erdogan's AKP government to push out the PKK. Therefore, now this is not a very popular position. Of course, we understand the economic situation of the Kurdistan region. They do share a border with Turkey. An economic partnership is welcomed. However, it should not come at the cost of allowing Turkish forces, military bases inside the Kurdistan region. It should not come at the cost of allowing airstrikes on civilian areas in the Kurdistan region. And also, the Kurdistan regional government, led by the KDP, has not spoken out about Turkish aggression. Instead, it sheds light on PKK's presence. The argument from the Kurdish perspective is, hey, the PKK is a Kurdish group inside Kurdistan. Where else should they be? Right? This is a Kurdish group that's that's inside its own historical territories, and the KDP wants to push these guys out. So unfortunately, this comes with military partnership between the AKP, Erdogan's government, and the KDP, and that includes intelligence sharing, because Turkey would not get this information without on the ground intel.
The Talabani group, however, has relationships with Iran, don't they?
That's right. They're closer because they're borders with Iran. They have closer ties with Iran. The Talabani group has attempted to defy Turkish authority over their regions by partnering with the Kurds in Syria, by giving them weapons, by aiding them in recent years. But at the end of the day, they are conducting drone strikes in the Talabani areas. This would not be possible without some sort of communication between these Kurdish parties and the Turkish government. The Kurdish government should stand with the Kurds. It should tell Turkey to leave its territory. It should not tell other groups. It should not take a tough stance against Kurdish groups. Rather, it should take a tough stance against an intervention from an invading force such as Turkey.
So when you said at the beginning of the show that this is a complex situation, you weren't mincing words. This is really complex. I mean, we and especially for the person who may not know what the PYD and the YPG and the PKK, what they all are. The whole idea is the Kurdish region. Let's look the whole 9 yards from Iraq, Iran to Syria. That whole region, not all these groups are in agreement with how they want their own independence, correct?
That's correct. And some actually don't even want their independence. That's the stand that I disagree with. I think state sovereignty and self-determination is key to securing individual rights for the Kurds and access to international platforms. And that's the issue right here, is that this is a historical issue that these adversaries surrounding the Kurdish people, Iraq, Turkey, Iran, even Syria, have always pitted the Kurds against one another. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, these different groups have taken the bait to one-up each other because everybody wants to rule the region. Wow.
Yeah. So really, it continues to get more muddled as time goes on in reality. The latest revelation, we only have about a minute, but I want to get this in. The latest information, remember John Bolton's book that came out. If you did read the whole book or just some of the book, what revelations did we get out of that book that Saul put the current administration's relationship with the Kurdish people?
Right. I did not read the whole book. I did read the Kurdish sections, automatically went straight to the Kurdish sections naturally. For us, it wasn't a surprise. I mean, we kind of knew and felt that this was the way the administration was feeling, but this book just, whether it's true or not, it revealed what we were feeling. And the withdrawal from Syria was proof of that. The inaction in Kirkuk from 2017, if you recall, was a proof of that. The inaction in Afrin was proof of that. So, I mean, the Kurds were expecting this. And the Kurds knew, for example, Ambassador James Jeffrey wasn't totally on the Kurdish side. He was pushing more of a Turkish policy inside Syria, forcing the Kurds to take down their defenses before the withdrawal occurred. So, I mean, unfortunately, this is the reality of the Kurds. Whether we like it or not, we still have to work with this administration, with any administration, Democrat or Republican, and we will continue to do so.
Well, you've got a lot of work ahead of you. We're going to come back after the break and pick up on some more questions that we have. I just want to remind you guys that are listening to us on Israel News Talk Radio, if you want to get a hold of Jerry or I, just our first name, Rod or Jerry, at israelnewstalkradio.com, and we'd love to hear from you. Also, leave a comment on the YouTube channel as you're watching the video. We'll be right back after these messages. Stand by.
I have a title for this program, Diliman.
What's that?
Erdogan loves the Kurds so much he wants to kill them.
That's right.
He loves them to death.
Well,
exactly, literally.
Literally, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think it was in his book, he said that Bolton mentioned that for Erdogan, a good Kurd was a dead Kurd.
Correct.
And, that's a good title right there. I mean, a good Kurd is a dead Kurd.
Actually, yes, that would be a good title.
Yeah, it's sort of like a famous U.S. Indian War general who said that the only good Indian was a dead one.
Right.
Custer, I think his name was.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So when we come back, we've knocked some of this stuff. The only other interesting thing about the book that Bolton put out there was a lot of us argued about a multinational force to monitor the whole activity in the northeast in Syria.
Right.
And the question is, why didn't that surface? Was it just too difficult to do, or?
That's a good question. Yeah, we can touch on that, actually.
Yeah. So we'll open with that and basically move on.
There is, I've got to make a correction here real quick too.
Sure.
Yeah, I can only imagine the how convoluted things can get on the ground. My concern is the actual people that are on the ground trying to work these out, whether they're representatives from the State Department, whether they're military representatives, contractors. There is a lot of shifting sand in that situation.
And then anything can be undermined anytime with a decision here in Washington.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
And you have how many aid organizations working out of there?
Okay. And then towards the latter part of this segment, I'd like to deal with the Kurdish caucus inside the U.S. Congress. The reason I say that is just yesterday, I guess one of the members, Representative Cooper, came back with some comments about what we were just talking about.
Right.
That's an indication that anytime the people in the House, in particular, who surface and develop a caucus, believe that that's an important issue that, quote, this deliberative body should be concerned about.
Yep. That's exactly
It's a good sign in many ways.
Jim Cooper, I believe he's from Nashville.
Yeah.
My goodness. I have another mistake I had to fix. Stand by.
It's okay. So since November, how have things worked out for you, Diliman?
It's going well with the organization right now. Honestly, we're looking for funding.
Yep.
If you guys have anyone that you can introduce me to that would be interested in investing in AFK, of course, I see this as a cause that we can all get behind. I think that's just the phase we're in. And on top of that, we're working on projects, pushing out pieces, making phone calls on the Hill. So we're trying to do everything all at once. And we were going to launch in March of 2020, but because of the withdrawal happened, we kind of fast forwarded the launch so we can get to work. And then COVID hit, so it's pushed everything back.
Right.
So we've only had about 3.5, maybe 4 months of actual freedom to do everything in person.
Your advantage is that you speak in idiomatic American English, having been raised here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Because my experience with a number of leaders, particularly on the SDC side, is very few of them are even close to being articulate in English.
And exactly. I mean, that's been an unfortunate setback for them. They're gradually improving on that issue. They're getting used to Washington talk and DC politics and America. They're more aware from, it's been a progress since 2017. So I think that's when their presence was strong here when they started up until now. Yeah. So it's a coastal province.
Are you talking about the Washington doublespeak?
Yep, exactly. You know what I mean.
Sounds like Italian mobsters, like, the thing that I was telling you I was going to do. Oh. Yeah, that's how it works.
Yep, that's right.
Well, there's a line from a famous movie called Clear and Present Danger that deals with taking out a cartel in Colombia.
Yeah, I've seen that movie.
So the corrupt president says, when he's confronted by Jack Ryan, well, you're now part of the big dance here in Washington. Get with a two-step.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's scary. Okay, guys, we're ready. Queued up. 3,
okay.
2, 1.
Welcome back to Beyond the Matrix, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
We are in the third and final segment. I'm Rod Bryant, along with Jerry Gordon. We have Diliman Abdulkader, and we've been talking about the latest information with the Kurdish people, his work now with a new job that he's working on. So I want to get a little bit more information about what's happening. Jerry, I'm going to kick it on over there to you.
One of the revelations in the Bolton book talked about the failure to form a multinational monitoring force that would have been a bulwark of sorts against the demands of Erdogan to conquer the whole area. Why did that fail?
The international forces that were this was one of the top asks by the Kurdish ally.
That's correct.
This was an alternative to having a large U.S. presence there. So this would have been in the United States' favor. It did not come into fruition largely because European allies were not able to, put in the number of forces that were needed to be there, and they could not. And due to politics, the fragility of the area, their argument was that we cannot rely on the United States because, hey, it may withdraw. So that was the reality and the real picture of it. It would have been the best alternative to having U.S. forces there. I think, despite the coalition still being present there, an international force is still an answer. So it's not too late. However, this requires that Turkey still withdraw. So you can't have stability in Syria without Turkey fully withdrawing from Syria. And in order to do that, you have to have an international force that is willing to push back Turkey through political and military means. And by military, I don't mean full-on war with Turkey, but I mean having a presence there, making sure they don't continue to expand their areas that was green-lighted to them back in October 2019.
What kind of group? Go ahead. Go ahead,
Did
Jerry.
Turkey's membership in NATO have anything to do with that failure?
It has everything to do with that failure. And unfortunately, there is not a mechanism within NATO to suspend or eject a partner. And Turkey has been abusing its NATO membership to invade parts of Kurdistan and to kill civilians. And unfortunately, NATO has been silent. We were discussing the intervention in Iraqi Kurdistan earlier, the autonomous region. Not one word from NATO. There was literally a video of a family in a resort. A dad was teaching the kids how to swim, and a Turkish drone bomb, dropped right next to them. Fortunately, then no harm was done. It was a few meters away. But this is the reality that, hey, is this what NATO stands for? How long are we going to allow Turkey to do what it wants? And how many passes will Turkey get until there's an answer? Or is it too late? And I've said this before in my tweets, and I'll say it again. Turkey is today's Nazi Germany. And their whole mission and ideology inside the Turkish state is to eliminate the Kurdish people. Turkey's war is not with the PKK only. It is aimed at all Kurds. And I think John Bolton put this in his book. He said, for Erdogan, a good Kurd is a dead Kurd. That's something that the international community must pay attention to before it's too late.
Rod?
As I listen to this, I realize that international politics can make some strange bedfellows. And I'm thinking back in history at the early 1930s with Hitler, and how many of the U.S. politicians were enamored by Hitler and by Mussolini, by their fascist ideals. This is before they started terrorizing Europe. And we almost see the same thing. It's like you have to deal with Erdogan. They really don't like him, but it's better than what we could get elsewhere. Maybe if we ousted him, there'd be a worse situation. So it's status quo is their go-to answer in the State Department. That has been their historical stance, is status quo. Many times, though, the status quo ends up backfiring terribly. And this is what I'm hoping is not going to take place. Before, you had mentioned about your organization. If you wouldn't mind repeating the name of the organization, and give us a little bit of information how individuals who listen to this show can help with the actual promoting of the Kurdish people and the resolving conflict in that region.
Thank you, for sure. It's American Friends of Kurdistan. You can visit us, get more information at AmericanFriendsOfKurdistan.org. And we're here in Washington. We're doing the hard work, the everyday work that has been missing for decades. For the Kurdish people and the American people. We're here to go beyond the status quo policy that you were just mentioning and introduce a new policy that looks at the Middle East for what it is and backs our reliable allies, and where taxpayer monies are not wasted. And we strongly believe, in addition to our other allies such as Israel, that the Kurds are a reliable partner that we can count on. Any assistance that we can get from viewers, investing and donating at AFK, is very appreciated. And because we can get results, we have an experienced team in Washington, and we have true intentions. We try to preserve America's national security interests and try to have a small impact on this big mess in what the Middle East is.
Well, let me ask you, do you feel that you have an effective ear of policymakers in D.C.?
That's a tough question.
Honestly
speaking, no. That's the short answer. But I understand personally from my own experience in Washington that this is a long-term work that we have to do. Lobbying doesn't just happen overnight. Lobbying is not just calling randomly to elected members and hoping they introduce a bill. This is about educating on the plight of the Kurds. This is about educating on the partnership that we have with Americans and the Kurds. And honestly, all you need is a few members to really truly understand this to push these policies forward.
Would you know the name of the congressmen that are a part of the Kurdish caucus?
Yes, I believe it's Congressman Rooney is one of them, and many other members of Congress are part of it. However, it's only active when it's more reactionary with the caucus, unfortunately. We always communicate with these with the members of the caucus, American Kurdish Congressional Caucus. Some have outspoken, especially with Kurdish populations, such as in Nashville, Tennessee, with Jim Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry, go ahead.
What is the status of these former ISIS fighters and their families at a place where you were resident for nearly 7 years, out the UN Al-Hol refugee camp?
Right. So the status hasn't changed much. In fact, I would argue it's probably gotten worse, largely because COVID-19 has hit. As you know, the Kurdish authorities, the Syrian Democratic Forces, don't have the tools that is needed to face such a demand. Largely because first they're a non-state actor. Second, something very important to shed light on is the Caesar Act that was just implemented by the United States, the Caesar Sanctions Act on Syria, which yes, it targets the Assad family. However, it has an indirect effect on the population of northeast Syria, meaning that it also affects the refugee camps. The numbers at the camp at Al-Hol is still about 75 to 85,000, with I believe it's if I'm not mistaken, 14,000 foreigners there, with about 2,000 being Europeans. These former ISIS wives, children, it's filled with children, former fighters, even Iraqis. There's a whole section of the camp where it's just focused on Iraqis, have been neglected. They're the host states, the home states don't want to basically bring these people back now, but you have to provide an alternative if you're not, going to lighten the load on the Kurdish forces, because they still have their civilians and dissidents to focus on as well. So unfortunately, the situation is still worse. One improvement they have been trying to make is to register the refugees there and the IDPs there, just so they know who's actually there. But this is also, of course, have faced pushback from the refugees there in particular.
I would assume they don't want to be registered because they don't want to be found out, correct?
No, exactly. And, some have ran away. Some have been smuggled out for thousands of dollars. Some have rioted. Some have burned tents. So it's a tense situation. It's not what we have in mind as a refugee camp. People are suffering. Of course, they're suffering. But there's also a darker side to this, is that I don't want to, maybe it's not the correct way to put this, but in one way or another, it's more of a containment camp as well to prevent these former ISIS wives from pouring out into the civilian population.
So at this point, is it considered a humanitarian crisis, or is it just a detainment which we don't know what to do with them? And it just, at some point, somebody with a bigger brain has got to figure out a resolution for this, correct?
Right, exactly. It's both. It's both a humanitarian crisis, and there has to be an alternative solution. And that's where the international community has to be reliable and come forward to provide an alternative.
Right.
And why it's important to recognize this region as an autonomous region, so they can have access to these avenues.
Absolutely. Diliman, thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully we can have you back here real soon. Keep us posted on the latest and greatest information. You guys have been listening to Beyond the Matrix here on Israel News Talk Radio. And until next week, Jerry and I will say shalom. We'll see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Oh, great. I love
You're an awesome communicator.
I enjoyed that. It's been a while.
Really is there any way that we can take the video and get it out there?
As far as this video?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Send me the link. What I'm going to do is put it on our website. I'll put it on our social media pages as well. I'll put it on my own personal page.
Excellent.
Just send me the link. I'll put it out. And if you guys have, I don't know if there's a actual video or clips, whatever you guys want to send me.
We'll have the whole show up for everybody to watch. And when I get the permanent link, I'll send it to you. And by the way, you guys who are watching YouTube, thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. It's a new test, an adventure, and we're getting good shows, good ratings. So give us a shout out and make some comments down in the section. If you hadn't subscribe right there. Until next week, we'll see you guys later.